Hey, I'm Cyclon. Today I want to share with you the potential later stages of my bow Deadeye. Going one, actually. So, very quickly the base idea. Warden is very powerful once you have access to the quality of life that the Deadeye has too early. You need to be fast enough that you don't need to rely on Tailwind or get Tailwind on boots. You need additional sources of plus projectiles, so you don't need endless munition. And you want to get power shot in a different way, preferably on the bow. I get to later. Once we have that, Warden is unlocked because of all the damage, offensive power, and the absurd defensive potential of Oath of Winter. So, this PoB has different stages, low budget, mid budget, and high budget, and it also has two configs. Do note that you also need to change the config when you swap from high budget to mid budget or the other way around. So, also, it's very important to note that this is very theoretical and it is just assumed to be working this way. There might be things subject to change depending on how the actual gameplay will feel in the upcoming league. The low budget setup on the tree, on the skills, and on the item is exactly the high league start budget from the actual guide, which is here, Deadeye bow. This is the actual guide, so the high budget here, the entry, the crit swap, and the high league start budget gear is 1-to-1 what the low budget on the endgame setup will be. So just so it's directly connecting. So I will not be covering that. I will be starting with mid-budget. On mid-budget, there are a few things that are changing on our tree. We're still using Thrill of Battle, and we are going to be using Cornered Prey, and we need something to apply bleed, which we do have, and I think it's gonna feel really good. But it also has some other things. We are moving away from the top part. We are able to grab Clever Thief, but I think it's not gonna be as needed, so I might even skip that. Instead, we get our Mark Mastery down here, giving us Cutting Strike and giving us Frenzy Charges when we hit the marked enemy. Then we're gonna be using two large clusters. We are gonna be using one with Arcing Shots, Fuel the Fight, and Smite the Weak, resulting in Fuel the Fight and Arcing Shots to be in the front positions and Smite the Weak in the end position. I feel obligated to note that I didn't come up with this idea. I've seen it being used by Fopgun, and I really like the idea when you split your your nodes on two large clusters, get them in a way that you only need the front ones and never need to spec into the last one. So I adapted this to my version as well. Then on the other one, we are going to be using Feed the Fury, Fuel the Fight, Martial Prowess to get Martial Prowess and Feed the Fury. So we have Life Leech here and Mana Leech here, which means we don't need the Clever Thief here anymore, but we can still pick it up if we want to. In a later stage, we can optionally also pick up an Unnatural Instinct here, in case we do need more life. But that much is grabbing ahead. The Lethal Pride we want could again have something like percentage strength, like on Hurtseeker, and double damage like on Thrill of Battle. Once we have that, we got a good Lethal Pride on our hand. We're also gonna be using a massive Spread of Hope, getting us a bit of reservation efficiency, getting a bit of life, and also helping us with allocating nodes efficiently inside a Lethal Pride range. Otherwise, the tree is with the usual stuff of projectiles, spell suppression, and damage. The skills on mid-budget, we're gonna be replacing our artillery ballista with a storm rain tornado shot apply setup. This is a life tap mana forge. This will result in a ton of hits so that we apply our bleed. And also, if we are ready on Warden, if we can swap to Warden early, depending on, again, how it's actually gonna feel in-game, it's gonna result in a lot of hits that should be able to apply Oath of Winter with either the Freeze, Chill, and the Hoarfrost, and will also result in a lot of hits to apply Oath of Spring. So this is why I call it an apply setup. It will do decent enough damage. We might need to change some things around here depending on how it feels in-game. Our auras will be Grace, Skitterbots, Wall Haste, and Precision. We're going to be using both normal haste and the wall version if we can. The wall version is a good damage spike, but of course it's temporary. We want to use Skitterbots because we're using interrogation. The Secrets of Suffering means we cannot apply Chill or Shock. Skitterbots will apply Chill or Shock for us, unrelated if we have interrogation or not, meaning we have up to 5 ailments that are applied, meaning that our elemental hit of the spectrum will deal 30% more damage by using Skitterbots instead of using Haste or instead of using Anchor or Wrath. So it's good damage for less reservation. Then we are going to be using a Sniper's Mark on Hit and an Automated Steel Skin. We have 2 flexible spots that I'm not sure what to fill yet. If you have any idea what I can put here, or if I forgot anything and you are able to help me point that out, I would really appreciate that. On the mid-budget item changes, we want to get a fledgling with reservation multiplier, so that we're actually able to afford using these for hours in our helmet without needing an enlighten. Our body armor we want to upgrade from a high-risk Aya to any high body armor with a decent spell suppression roll, resistances, an open prefix, and a high life. The reason for that is as we are using a fledgling, our life total is very low, and I don't like having less than 4k life. Now next league we're gonna have higher life rolls on boots, gloves, helmet, and bodies, as well as I think belts, but we are only limited to these 3 on this stage of the gearing. So we want as much life possible as we can get on our boots, gloves, and boots, and then we want resistances as needed to fix this. We also want an elemental avoidance craft on our body and on the implicits on our boots. This will net us about 40% avoidance, then we get another 20% from thick skin, and the last 50% or 40, but we're gonna get 50 anyway, going to be getting by an ancestral vision, making us avoidance, elemental avoidance, or elemental immune, however you want to put it. We then just need fixing resistances on our gloves. We definitely want to pick up Rage Implicit. It's more damage now. It's even more important to grab this up as quick as possible. Our amulet, I eventually want to get into a yoke. We can use a high-risk truth until we are able to afford a yoke. Once we are able to afford a yoke, it's definitely powerful and we do want to pick that up. And the rings definitely have to be a taming, preferably with a good roll and elemental catalysts. However, they might be expensive next league, so we might need to delay that a little bit, at least until we have the Headhunter. Headhunter is definitely the big item to go for here. This will incredibly boost our mapping time, so it's gonna be a really powerful item. We also are considering using a Dying Sun. Personally, I really like hitting a rare unique enemy, so it is used on countering a leak mechanic more than just randomly in a map on a white mob as soon as we start moving. So this is why I like that enchant over the use on full or use at the end enchant for a Dying Sun. And we just allow us additional projectiles. However, a good alternative is a Stibnite Flask, a Silver Flask, a Progenesis. Taste of Fate isn't that good anymore, but there are a lot of other flasks we can use if we have the feeling that we want to. We should still be elemental rest capped without this flask, so look to cap first your fire rest and then enable this flask. You're not thinking, hey, I'm fire rest capped while all the fire rest comes from this flask. As we're moving to the high budget, there are some changes that we need to do. We will be dropping our interrogation because we do want to transition into a Warden. We're gonna get Scorch, Freeze, and Chill, and Shock. These will be our elements, so this means that we can no longer use interrogation and we don't want to use Skitterbots. Instead, we will be using Purity of Elements. Now, the setup here is definitely very expensive. We're gonna be using a lot of insane items that we either need to self-craft or buy for a good chunk of currency. So we're starting with Enlighten level 4, Grace, Haste, and Enlighten, and Purity of Elements, so that we have an easier time capping our resistances and we don't need avoidance on gear, so we can focus on other things in our gear. Also making it easier to get a higher life on our body armor, as we don't need to risk a high life roll after we got it with a Veiled Orb now. The tree doesn't change too much outside of that. We are using an Enduring Composure to get Endurance charges. They're very powerful. We want to use this as early as possible. I think I forgot to mention that earlier. Drop the Interrogation and we are picking up Forbidden Flame and Forbidden Flesh. The reason for that is Fury of Nature. Now this thing has been slumbering for quite a while. It was used, I think, last in Lake of Kalandra by Snoobay and people that have also used his build. But since then, I haven't really seen people talk about this. And this is the league to talk about. It gives ailment spread, which is gonna combine with overwinter to spread an absurd amount of freeze. It's gonna help us spread the shock so that we just keep spreading shock until we hit shock 50 shock cap on enemies, and it should help us getting a good scorch on enemies as well. As such, the config here is set up very arguably unrealistic. We assume max cap of shock, we assume max effectiveness of shock, we assume frozen and chilled, and we assume a 60% scorched. Because this is 100% more effect, meaning that our scorch should be at 60 and not at 30. This is at least the assumption. Now, hopefully everything works as intended, and this is gonna be way better than inverting the resistance, because this is just straight up minus 120 resistance, meaning that is better than prime time Omni, at least for most builds at that point. So this is gonna be a very theoretical PoE in the sense that I hope everything works out how I intend to. If that is the case, we're gonna do massive damage during uptime of Unbound, and with the downtime of Unbound, we should still theoretically do more damage than before. The skills will change because we want to use returning projectile. We will be needing to replace that with another damage modifier. We want to drop tornado shot and get a cast on crit tornado setup in here instead. Then we want to have an mark on hit, still sniper's mark on hit, our auras, sealskin, and we need precision because we dropped it out of the helmet in the boot, so we have one more flexible spot. The items are getting insane. We want a near perfect bow with a far shot enchantment. Now the reason I'm confident that we can have far shot as an enchantment is here. Now if we look, this is from the clip where he's hovering point blank and he's going to be clicking it, but if you go back just a frame or two, going at very slow pace. Yeah, again, it's very, very quick, and I need to time it perfectly. Yeah, he is hovering far shot, and there's a bow symbol. This is a fraction of a second. It's just for a frame or two where we can see this. But hovering far shot has the bow symbol, so even if we ignore the top cap, if we don't see if we can craft it or not, we assume far shot is craftable on bow. Is this, or enchantable on bow. So we assume we have far shot enchantment on bow, meaning that we do need to get Nemesis as a ring for returning projectiles. So we fire in all directions, everything that is approaching us gets hit, gets frozen, and then we're gonna have a fun time freezing and destroying the screen. So we have far shot, we have massive damage on our bow, we have projectiles on our bow, we have a good quiver, we have a helmet with mana cost and reservation, spell suppression, chaos res, body armor with as high life as possible, good amount of evasion rating, haste effect, aura effect, spell suppression, reservation efficiency, chaos res, whatever we can get. On our gloves, we want two things. First of all, we want temple gloves with damage against shield enemies. Then we want pierce as an unveil or as a craft, and pierce on the implicit as well as rage on the implicit. Those are gonna be insane gloves, but they are going to be reasonably expensive. The boots, I was thinking if I should just have actually made them. No, I didn't even make them. I compared those boots to a theoretically elevated tailwind, elevated onslaught, elusive boots that that we used before we had Eldritch Implicits. Because we are on a Warden, we don't have Tailwind anymore, and I looked at it and they were barely better than this, because we can just get Brittle Ground on the implicits on the boots, and if we're making it last 2 seconds or more, we can just pull the enemy, so we stand here, the enemy moves towards us, and we move further back, they are on Brittle Ground, and they just take 15% more damage, on top of having Brittle, meaning our crit is near perfect, or up to perfect. It's just gonna be very powerful, so that's why we want to have Brittle Ground in our boots implicits, and then we just have resistances, onslaught, spell suppression boots that just have good stats. We want to keep the yoke because I think it's gonna be very powerful. There's an argument to be made to swap to what was it? A focus amulet or the highest amulets with massive effect, but only 3 modifiers to get massive damage there. But I think a yoke is already insane damage, up to 20%. So I don't think we want to not have a yoke. We want a really good ring and then combine that with the Nemes. In later setup, we also want Progenesis. It could be that I will be going Petrified Blood because my effective hit pool, even with this much investment, still looks pretty bad. So it might be that I just go Petrified Blood and utilize the much damage reduction combining Progenesis and Petrified Blood. But that much for the build. If there are any questions, if anything was unclear, or you have anything you want to further inquire about or recommend me, as usual, comments are open, Discord is open, DM me over Discord is also viable, and I'll be seeing you in my next video or live on Twitch when I'm live streaming. And hopefully you have a wonderful day. Goodbye.